They called him invisible. Not out loud. Never directly. But invisibility has a sound, a silence that follows a person wherever they go. That was the sound Daniel Reyes lived with every day. At 4:45 every morning, before the city shook itself awake, Daniel entered the towering headquarters of Verexon Industries through the service entrance. The front doors were glass and grand, reserved for people with pressed suits and confident strides. The side door was metal, scratched, and unremarkable. It suited him. He signed his name on a clipboard no one ever checked and slipped on his navy blue janitor's uniform. It smelled faintly of detergent and old fabric. Daniel didn't mind. It meant stability. It meant food on the table. It meant silence. Verexon Industries was a global empire: technology, logistics, finance, defense contracts. Decisions made in its upper floors changed markets, sometimes countries. And yet, the man who cleaned those floors knew more about the world than most of the people who ruled it. Daniel pushed his cart slowly down the hallway, wheels squeaking softly. He preferred not to draw attention. Attention had never been kind to him. Employees began arriving around 6. Some nodded. Some stared through him as if he were glass. Others spoke freely around him, assuming he couldn't understand, or didn't matter. They were wrong on both counts. Daniel understood everything. English, Spanish, French, German, Mandarin, Arabic, Russian, Japanese, Portuguese. 9 languages. Each learned not from textbooks alone, but from survival. He had grown up moving from country to country, following his mother as she worked whatever job she could after his father disappeared during a diplomatic mission that was never fully explained. Embassies. Refugee centers. Border towns. Crowded apartments where walls were thin and languages mixed like overlapping radio signals. Daniel learned to listen before he learned to speak. By the time he was 18, language was no longer something he studied. It was something he inhabited. He earned scholarships. Lost them. Took care of his younger sister. Missed interviews. Missed chances. Life narrowed, slowly, quietly, until one day he was standing in a uniform room holding a mop instead of a briefcase. And he accepted it. Not because he lacked ability. Because responsibility had taught him that pride was expensive. On this particular morning, something felt off. The air inside Verexon's executive floors was tighter than usual. Conversations were hushed, clipped. Stress moved through the corridors like static electricity. Daniel noticed these things because he noticed everything. As he cleaned the glass walls of Conference Room A, he heard fragments of conversation drifting from inside. The Seoul delegation arrives at 9 sharp. The Moscow team is already unhappy about the terms. If the Beijing side walks, the entire deal collapses. Daniel paused his cloth for a second. This wasn't an ordinary meeting. Conference Room A was only used for events that mattered: international negotiations, mergers, crisis summits. The kind of meetings where one wrong word could cost billions. Inside the room, assistants rushed back and forth. Projectors were tested. Water glasses aligned with surgical precision. Legal teams reviewed documents for the 10th time. At the head of it all stood Victor Harlan, CEO of Verexon Industries. Victor was a man carved from discipline. Mid-50s. Silver at the temples. Eyes sharp enough to make seasoned executives straighten their backs. He had built Verexon through ruthless focus and an unshakable belief in competence. Victor did not tolerate inefficiency. He did not tolerate excuses. And he especially did not tolerate surprises. Which was why his jaw tightened when his chief of staff approached him with pale eyes. "The lead interpreter won't make it," she said quietly. Victor didn't raise his voice. "Explain," he said. "She collapsed on her way here. Hospitalized. They're still assessing." A pause. "How many backup interpreters do we have?" Victor asked. "For this level?" "None who cover all regions." Another pause. "Longer." "Then get me the best partial team you can," Victor said. "And pray they don't make mistakes." Mistakes. Daniel heard the word clearly as he wiped the edge of the table. Mistakes in language were dangerous. He knew that better than anyone. A sentence could mean respect in one culture and insult in another. A pause could be agreement, or a threat. As executives filed in, tension rose. A senior manager leaned toward another and muttered in German, clearly irritated. Das ist Wahnsinn. Unperfekt Übersetzung sind wir erledigt. Daniel understood every word. Another replied in Mandarin, assuming privacy. Daniel kept cleaning. Someone laughed nervously in Russian. Daniel adjusted a chair. No one noticed. At 8:55 a.m., the international delegations arrived. First came the Japanese representatives, polite, reserved, eyes observant. Then the Russian team, direct, guarded. Then the Brazilian and Emirati delegates, warm on the surface, calculating underneath. Languages filled the room like overlapping currents. The interpreters struggled. They were competent, but stretched thin. Nuances slipped. Tone blurred. Cultural context vanished in translation. Victor felt it immediately. A Japanese delegate paused longer than expected after a translated statement. A Russian representative's expression hardened at a phrase that should have been neutral. The Brazilian lead tilted his head, confused, then smiled politely, never a good sign. Victor leaned back, fingers interlaced. This was slipping. Outside the room, Daniel stood by the wall with his cart. He heard everything through the glass. He knew exactly where things were going wrong. He hesitated. For years, silence had been his shield. Speaking now would shatter it. People didn't like being reminded that they had overlooked something, or someone. But then he heard it. A phrase in Japanese. Translated incorrectly. Not disastrously. But enough to imply arrogance. Daniel's chest tightened. Inside, the Japanese delegate's expression changed, subtle, controlled, but unmistakable. Victor noticed. What was that last point? Victor asked. The interpreter repeated it. Wrong again. Daniel spoke. He didn't plan to. The words simply stepped out of him. That's not what he meant, Daniel said calmly. The room froze. Every head turned. The janitor stood just inside the doorway, one hand on his cart. I'm sorry, Daniel added quickly. I shouldn't. Victor raised a hand. What did you say? Victor asked. Daniel swallowed. He wasn't rejecting the proposal, Daniel said. He was expressing concern about long-term trust and mutual responsibility. In Japanese, the phrasing emphasizes relationship before contract. Silence. The Japanese delegate looked at Daniel. Then smiled. And nodded. Victor's eyes sharpened. You speak Japanese, Victor said. Yes. And you understood him perfectly. Yes. Victor turned to the interpreter. Was that accurate? The interpreter hesitated. Yes. More accurate than my version. A murmur rippled through the room. Victor stood slowly. What is your name? He asked. Daniel Reyes. How many languages do you speak, Daniel Reyes? Daniel hesitated. 9. Someone scoffed quietly. Victor didn't. List them. Daniel did. One by one. Fluently. The delegations exchanged glances. Interest replaced impatience. Victor studied Daniel for a long moment. Then he made a decision that would ripple through the building. Sit, Victor said, gesturing to an empty chair at the table. Daniel didn't move. I'm just the janitor, he said softly. Victor's voice hardened, not with anger, but authority. Right now, you're the most qualified person in this room. Sit. Daniel obeyed. The meeting resumed. This time, Daniel spoke only when necessary. But when he did, the room changed. He didn't translate word for word. He translated meaning. He explained silences. Softened sharp edges. Clarified intentions hidden behind polite phrasing. The delegations relaxed. Trust formed. Victor watched everything. By the time the meeting ended, something extraordinary had happened. Not just a deal salvaged. But an illusion shattered. After the delegations left, Victor asked everyone else to step out. Only Daniel remained. You could have spoken sooner, Victor said. Yes. Why didn't you? Daniel met his eyes. Because no one ever asks janitors what they know. Victor nodded slowly. That's our mistake, he said. And in that moment, Daniel Reyes stopped being invisible. The building felt different after that meeting. Not louder. Not brighter. Heavier. As Daniel Reyes stepped out of conference room A, the corridor seemed to watch him. People who had passed him for years without a glance now looked twice. Some looked curious. Some uncomfortable. Some suspicious, as if intelligence had appeared in the wrong uniform. Daniel returned the cleaning cart to the supply room in silence. He did not feel victorious. He felt exposed. For the rest of the day, whispers followed him like shadows. That's him. The janitor. The one who spoke 9 languages. Did you see Victor's face? Daniel kept his head down. At 3:20 p.m., an email went out to senior leadership only. Subject, immediate internal review, conference room A. At 3:47 p.m., another email followed. Subject, Daniel Reyes, report to executive floor tomorrow, 8 a.m. Daniel read the notification twice on his phone that night. He didn't sleep much. Not because he was excited. Because history had taught him that moments like this often came with a price. The next morning, Daniel did not wear his uniform. He wore a plain button-down shirt and slacks, clothes he had kept for interviews that never went anywhere. The shirt was ironed carefully. The shoes were old but clean. At exactly 8 a.m., he stood outside Victor Harlan's office. Come in, Victor said. The office was minimalist. No photos. No awards on display. Just glass, steel, and a view of the city that looked small from this height. Victor gestured to a chair. Sit. Daniel sat. Victor didn't start with praise. He started with questions. Where did you grow up? Daniel answered. Why janitorial work? Daniel answered. Why 9 languages? Daniel answered. Why silence? Daniel paused. Because when you grow up moving between places, he said carefully, you learn that speaking at the wrong time can cost you safety. Silence becomes a habit. Victor listened. Not like an executive. Like a student. When Daniel finished, Victor leaned back. You understand something most people here don't, Victor said. This company negotiates across borders, cultures, egos. And yet we rely on surface-level fluency. He folded his hands. I'm offering you a position. Daniel didn't react. Cultural and linguistic strategy, Victor continued. You'll work directly with me. Confidentially. You'll sit in meetings. Review communications. Advise leadership. Daniel waited. And, he asked quietly. And you'll be paid accordingly. Daniel exhaled slowly. I didn't ask for this, he said. I know, Victor replied. That's why you're right for it. Daniel accepted. Not because of ambition. Because walking away would mean returning to silence. And silence had already taken enough. The announcement was not public. At first. Daniel's role was described vaguely, internal consultant. No title that could be mocked or challenged easily. Still, resistance came. In subtle ways. Meetings where chairs were mysteriously full. Emails where he was CC'd but ignored. Smiles that didn't reach eyes. One executive finally said it out loud during a closed-door discussion. With respect, she said, this feels unconventional. Victor's response was immediate. So was building this company, he said. And yet here we are. Daniel remained calm. He had learned long ago that hostility often came from fear. Over the next weeks, his value became impossible to deny. A contract nearly failed when a Middle Eastern partner interpreted a deadline as disrespectful pressure. Daniel caught it in time and reframed the language. A European board member bristled at a phrase that sounded neutral in English but dismissive in his native tongue. Daniel adjusted it. He wasn't louder. He was precise. Slowly, people began seeking him out. Quietly. Can you review this email before I send it? Does this phrasing work in Seoul? Am I missing something here? Daniel never said, I told you so. He simply helped. One evening, long after most of the building had emptied, Daniel stood by the window in the executive lounge. Below, the city glowed. Victor joined him. You changed the temperature of this place, Victor said. I didn't mean to, Daniel replied. That's the point, Victor said. You didn't force it. Victor hesitated. Why did you stay invisible for so long, he asked. Daniel thought. Because I thought being seen required permission, he said. And I never thought I'd be granted it. Victor nodded slowly. Then we failed you, he said. Daniel shook his head. No, he said. You just didn't know. Weeks turned into months. Daniel's role expanded. So did his influence. Not power. Influence. People began to listen differently, not just to him, but to each other. Language mattered more. Silence was respected. Meetings grew shorter. Clearer. More human. One afternoon, Daniel passed the supply room. His old cart was there. Clean. Parked. Unused. He didn't feel nostalgic. He felt grateful. Not for the promotion. But for the moment when someone finally asked what he knew. Because the world is full of people like him. Quiet. Capable. Unseen. And all it takes to change everything, is one person willing to listen. The final test arrived quietly. A week later, Berexon was hosting the largest press and partner event in its history, an announcement that would shift international markets and cement its place as a global leader. CEOs, government officials, media, investors, all were invited. Cameras, microphones, translators, and security filled the glass tower from top to bottom. Daniel arrived early, dressed in his usual button-down shirt and slacks. He carried no cart, no tools. Only a notebook, a pen, and the awareness that every word spoken in the next 48 hours could ripple farther than any spreadsheet. Victor met him in the executive lounge. They'll be watching everything, Victor said. We can't afford missteps. Not with diplomats, not with press, not with investors. One mistranslation, one cultural misstep, and the credibility we've built over decades collapses. Daniel nodded. I understand, he said. And he did. More than anyone could guess. The event began with pomp and precision. Red carpets, introductions, and speeches polished to perfection. Daniel worked behind the scenes, reviewing every prepared statement, checking live translations, and subtly adjusting phrases that could be misinterpreted in any of the 9 languages he mastered. By mid-morning, the first live broadcast began. A Japanese minister spoke. Daniel noticed a subtle nuance in his phrasing that, if left uncorrected, would have implied criticism of European regulatory policies. In the split second before the official translator could speak, Daniel whispered a correction into a discreet earpiece. The translator adjusted instantly. Disaster avoided. Next, a Brazilian CEO made a gesture that, in his culture, meant disagreement. The interpreter misread it as casual agreement. Daniel intervened silently, clarifying tone and meaning. The Brazilian smiled, nodding, unaware of how close a misunderstanding had come. The room moved seamlessly, but Daniel's mind never rested. Every sentence, every pause, every eye contact was noted. By afternoon, Victor called him aside. You're doing more than translating, Victor said. You're shaping perception. Daniel shrugged. I'm just making sure they hear what they mean to say, he said. Victor's eyes studied him. You're more than the quiet one, Victor said. You're essential. The final segment of the event was a live panel involving all international delegates. Daniel positioned himself just out of sight, ready to intervene if necessary. A tense moment arrived. A Russian executive phrased a question in a way that sounded accusatory in English. The French delegate prepared to respond defensively. Daniel inhaled. He spoke softly into the interpreter's earpiece. Adjust the phrasing. Neutralize the tone. Emphasize collaboration. The panelists followed. The tension dissolved. The audience remained unaware. When the last question ended and the microphones were off, the crowd erupted into applause. Cameras flashed. Smiles all around. Victor approached Daniel. "Do you realize what just happened?" he asked. Daniel smiled faintly. "Yes. Nobody knows it, but we just prevented a global misunderstanding." Victor laughed quietly, shaking his head. "From janitor to guardian," he said. Daniel remained silent. Later that evening, the press released stories praising Verexen's leadership, vision, and diplomacy. Not a single article mentioned Daniel. Not yet. The next morning, he returned to his workspace. It was familiar, comforting, a small corner with his notebook, pens, and clean floor. Executives walked past. Some nodded, some paused, some still didn't notice him. That would change over time. Daniel realized something profound: visibility was not about recognition. It was about responsibility. About being present when it mattered. About acting even when no one applauded. Months passed. Daniel trained a small internal team in cultural and linguistic strategy, ensuring that the company would never again rely on luck in sensitive negotiations. Yet he remained the same person in essence: quiet, observant, diligent. Until one day, the board requested his presence. The story was finally ready to be told. At the annual shareholders' meeting, Victor invited Daniel to join him on stage, not as a janitor, not as a consultant, but as the architect of the company's unseen victories. For the first time, the room recognized him. Cameras turned. Recorders clicked. Applause erupted. Daniel looked out at the sea of faces. Some astonished, some respectful, some inspired. He did not smile widely. He did not boast. He simply nodded. Because he understood a truth few ever realized. The world notices those who wait in silence. Who listen more than they speak. Who act when the moment demands it. And who carry knowledge that others take for granted. Victor leaned close. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. Daniel took a deep breath. "I've been ready," he said. The story of the quiet janitor who spoke 9 languages, the one who saved deals and shaped empires without ever seeking recognition, was finally told. But Daniel knew it didn't matter if the world celebrated him or not. What mattered was that the right people had been heard. And that was enough. Because sometimes, being seen is less about ego and more about impact. And Daniel Reyes had changed the world quietly, perfectly, and irreversibly. Success does not arrive quietly. It announces itself in small disruptions first. A pause where there used to be dismissal. A question where there used to be assumption. A look that lingers a second longer than comfort allows. Daniel Reyes felt those disruptions everywhere. He felt them when conversations stopped as he entered a room. When executives straightened their posture without knowing why. When people chose their words more carefully around him. Influence had a gravity to it. And gravity always attracted resistance. It started subtly. A senior vice president questioned the necessity of Daniel's presence during a European call. "We've handled these regions for years," he said, smiling thinly. "Do we really need additional oversight?" Daniel said nothing. Victor answered. "Yes." That was all. But the tension didn't disappear. It relocated. Emails arrived late. Documents were shared after decisions had already been made. Meetings were scheduled without notice. Daniel noticed everything. He always had. The real challenge arrived 3 months later. Verexen was preparing for its most ambitious move yet, a multi-region acquisition involving infrastructure assets across Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, and North Africa. If successful, it would redefine the company's future. If mishandled, it could fracture it permanently. Victor assembled a closed task force. Daniel was included. Some were not pleased. One executive, Marcus Feld, made no effort to hide it. "This is a financial operation," Marcus said during the first meeting. "Numbers. Compliance. Risk mitigation. Not linguistics." Daniel met his eyes calmly. "Language is risk," Daniel said. You just don't see it on spreadsheets. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Marcus smiled. We'll see, he said. They did. During early negotiations, progress stalled. On paper, everything aligned. In reality, distrust crept in. A Romanian partner felt disrespected by the pacing of demands. A Thai representative interpreted urgency as instability. A North African delegate bristled at a clause that echoed colonial-era language. Daniel flagged each issue. Marcus dismissed them. Overthinking, he said. We can't babysit feelings. Victor listened. And watched. Then came the incident. A draft agreement was sent without Daniel's review. Within hours, a key partner requested a pause. Within days, rumors of withdrawal surfaced. By the end of the week, one region had frozen negotiations entirely. The board demanded answers. A crisis meeting was called. The room was tense. Marcus spoke first. They're being unreasonable, he said. We followed standard procedure. Daniel spoke next. Standard for whom? He asked quietly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He explained. Line by line. Phrase by phrase. How a single word implied dominance. How a translated clause triggered historical memory. How silence in one culture meant rejection, not contemplation. When he finished, the room was silent. Marcus leaned back, arms crossed. So what, he said, we rewrite everything because someone felt uncomfortable. Daniel looked at him. No, he said. We rewrite it because they no longer trust us. Victor stood. That's enough, he said. He turned to Daniel. Fix it, he said. Daniel nodded. For the next 48 hours, Daniel barely slept. He rewrote proposals. Recorded voice explanations. Advised Victor on tone, pacing, and sequencing. He didn't just translate documents. He rebuilt relationships. Slowly, responses came back. Positive. Engaged. Open. The deal resumed. Marcus said nothing. Weeks later, the acquisition was approved. The board praised Victor's leadership. Privately, Victor addressed the task force. This did not succeed because of numbers alone, he said. It succeeded because someone understood people. His eyes met Daniel's. Not everyone applauded. But everyone understood. After the meeting, Marcus approached Daniel. Not with hostility. With curiosity. I underestimated you, Marcus said. Daniel nodded. That happens, he said. Marcus hesitated. Why didn't you push harder earlier, he asked. Daniel considered the question. Because people don't hear truths they're not ready to respect, he said. Marcus exhaled. Fair, he said. That night, Daniel returned home later than usual. His sister called. I heard about you, she said, laughing. Mom would have been proud. Daniel smiled. He didn't think of himself as successful. He thought of himself as useful. And that mattered more. At Virexen, things shifted. Titles mattered less than understanding. Meetings included pauses. Questions replaced assumptions. Daniel remained steady through it all. Until Victor called him one evening. There's something coming, Victor said. And it won't be easy. Daniel listened. Visibility, Victor continued, has a cost. Daniel understood that too. Better than anyone. Because being invisible had protected him. Being seen would test him. And the final test was closer than either of them realized.